Welcome back. We're doing another deep dive today, looking at some really fascinating source material you've shared. These are commentaries tied to Dhammapada verses, right?
That's right. And what's great about them is they often show us these, well, moments of interaction. Elder Ānanda asking the Buddha questions.
Ānanda, the Buddha's attendant. So his questions kind of prompt these deeper explanations from the Buddha.
Exactly. Real curiosity leading to, quite profound insights.
Okay, so our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to see what Ānanda's questions and the Buddha's answers in these specific sources tell us about, well, core teachings, enlightenment, what a noble being is.
And crucially, we're sticking only to what's in the material provided. No outside commentary, just what the texts themselves say.
Got it. Strictly source-based. Okay, let's dive into the first one then. This is from source 151. It starts with Elder Ānanda reflecting, sort of thinking to himself.
Yes, a common scene. He's thinking about how the Buddha has talked about past Buddhas, details like their parents, how long they lived, their enlightenment tree, disciples.
A lot of detail, yeah.
But then he realizes, wait a minute, something's missing. The Buddha hasn't mentioned their Uposatha, their observance day, the day for teaching.
So an omission sparks the question. He wonders if their schedule, let's say, was the same as the current Buddha's or maybe different.
Precisely. So he goes and asks the Buddha.
And the answer?
Well, the Buddha's answer, according to this source, is pretty striking. He confirms the timing was, in fact, very different, hugely different among those 7 Buddhas mentioned.
How different are we talking?
Get this. Vipassi Buddha, the source says, held his Uposatha only every 7 years.
7 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Sikhi and Vasavu every 6 years, Kakusanda and Kogamana once a year, and Kassapa Buddha every 6 months.
That's incredible variation. And the source mentions something about the teaching itself.
It does. It adds this interesting little note that for those Buddhas with the really long intervals, like 7 years, just that one day of teaching was considered enough to last them.
That's quite something. But, okay, so the timing varied wildly. What was the main point the Buddha made?
Well, this is the crucial part in the source. The Buddha emphasizes that even though the timing was all over the place, the core teaching, the Āvadapada was exactly the same verses for all of them.
Okay, so the what was constant, even if the when wasn't. And the source gives us those verses.
It does. 3 core verses. The first one is, avoiding all evil, cultivating good, purifying one's own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddhas.
Simple, but profound. How does the commentary in the source explain that?
So avoiding all evil is explained as basically avoiding all unskillful states of mind or action. Cultivating good means generating skillful states right from the moment someone goes forth onto the path, all the way up to arahantship, and then, continuing to develop that good.
Okay.
And purifying one's own mind, the commentary here links this specifically to cleaning the mind of the 5 hindrances, things like desire, ill will, laziness, restlessness, doubt.
The standard list, yeah. And the source says this applies to
all Buddhas. It explicitly states, this is the instruction, the teaching of all the Buddhas. Universal.
Right. A foundational teaching. What's the second verse?
The second one. Patience is the highest austerity. Nibbana is the supreme teaching of the Buddhas. One who harms others is not a renunciant. One who torments others is not an ascetic.
Another strong statement. What's the source's take on this one?
Patience is defined as endurance, called the supreme austerity. Then it clarifies who calls Nibbana supreme Buddhas, Pajeka Buddhas, and Anu Buddhas, so enlightened beings.
Okay.
And the second part is very direct. If someone harms or torments others, the source says they are definitely not a renunciant, not an ascetic. It connects inner practice with outer conduct.
Very clear link there. And the third verse?
Third one goes, not speaking ill of others, not harming others, restraint according to the Patumaka, moderation in eating, dwelling in seclusion, and applying oneself to higher thought. This is the teaching of the Buddhas.
That's got quite a few elements. How does the source break those down?
Okay, so not speaking ill means, well, not doing it yourself, but also not causing others to do it. Same for not harming, don't harm yourself or cause others harm.
Makes sense.
Restraint, according to the Pomaka, that refers to the main ethical rules, the precepts, but also include sense restraint, guarding the senses. Moderation in eating is simply knowing the right amount. Dwelling in seclusion means a solitary place, pretty straightforward. And applying oneself to higher thought, the source explains this as making effort in higher states of consciousness, specifically linking it to the 8 meditative attainments. the jhanas and formless states.
Right. So putting it all together from this first source, source 151, the takeaway seems to be that the practicalities, like the Uposatha schedule, could change dramatically between Buddhas.
But the fundamental path, the core ethical and mental training summed up in these verses.
That remained constant. That's the unchanging heart of the teaching across the different eras, according to this text.
Exactly. It really emphasizes that timeless core.
Okay, let's shift gears. Our next source, source 268, moves from teaching schedules to something more. Well, visual, radiance, or light. Ananda's observing again.
Yes, the setting is Uposatha. The Buddha's there. King Pasenadi arrives, and the text notes he's, heavily adorned, looking impressive. And nearby there's Elder Kaidoi meditating, who the source describes as having a golden-looking body.
So you've got several sources of light or brilliance in one scene.
Right, and Ananda carefully observes them all. The source says he looks at the setting sun's light, then the rising moon's light. He sees the king's radiance and notes specifically the king shines when he's adorned.
An important condition.
Then he looks at Elder Kaidoi's radiance from meditation. And finally, the Buddha's radiance.
And what's his conclusion after comparing all these different kinds of light?
The source states his conclusion clearly. The Buddha's radiance outshines all the others. It surpasses the sun, the moon, the adorned king, the meditating elder.
And does the Buddha comment on this observation?
He does. He confirms it with a verse, which the source includes. The sun shines by day, the moon shines by night. A warrior shines when armed, a Brahmin shines when meditating. But the Buddha shines with splendor all day and all night.
A very poetic comparison. Does the commentary explain each part?
Yes, it unpacks it line by line. The sun shines only by day, you don't see its path at night. The moon shines only by night and only when it's clear, not during the day.
Okay, limited.
A warrior shines when armed, with all the gear, the jewels, the army around him, not when he's in disguise or just, walking around normally.
Condition dependent again. And the Brahmin?
A Brahmin shines when meditating. But the source adds a crucial detail here. It specifies this refers to a perfected one, a kaisava, someone who has destroyed all defilements and prefers solitude over crowds.
So even that meditative radiance in this context is linked to a specific state and perhaps type of person.
Right. All these other forms of light or shining are limited by time, or by conditions like adornments, or by being in a specific state like meditation.
But the
Buddha, the verse says, shines constantly, day and night, with splendor. And the source commentary explains this is a five-fold splendor.
Five-fold splendor. How does the source define that?
It's quite interesting how it frames it. It says this splendor comes from the Buddha having overcome defilements using 5 things: virtue, quality, wisdom, merit, and Dhamma.
Okay.
And it explicitly lists what each overcomes. Virtue overcomes vice. Quality overcomes bad qualities. Wisdom overcomes foolishness. Merit overcomes demerit. And Dhamma overcomes unrighteousness.
Ah, so the radiance isn't just passive, it's presented as the active result of having conquered negativity through these positive qualities, a constant state.
Exactly. So this source uses this very tangible comparison of different lights to illustrate what it sees as the unique, constant, and unparalleled nature of a Buddha's enlightenment, contrasting it with brilliance that's temporary or conditional.
That's a powerful image. Okay, let's look at our third and final scenario from source 154. This time, Ananda's thinking about birthplaces.
Yet another daytime reflection scene in Jetavana. He starts thinking about where truly noble beings, exceptional beings, are actually born.
And he has some reference points for this.
He does. He remembers the Buddha talking previously about noble animals. The source mentions specific lineages for top-tier elephants, the Chadanta or Uposatha lines, or for noble horses, the Sindhava or Valahaka king lines, or that the best oxen come from the southern country.
So he's thinking, okay, we know where the best animals come from, geographically or by lineage.
Which leads him to the natural question, well, where does a noble person, a pure Sajanyo, come from? Where are they born?
Makes sense. So he asks the Buddha, what does the Buddha say, according to this source?
The answer recorded here is very, very specific. First, the Buddha says such a noble person is rare, really hard to find, and they are not born just anywhere.
Okay, rare and not everywhere. Does it say where they aren't born?
Yes, the source explicitly rules out border territories and low-caste families as birthplaces for this noble person.
Right. So restricted geographically and socially. Where do they get born then, according to this source?
The text says only in the central country, the Mashima Desa.
The central region. Does it define that?
Remarkably so. The source gives specific dimensions. 300 yojanas long if you measure straight, and 900 yojanas in circumference if you go around it.
Wow, that level of detail is quite specific for a geographical region in a text like this.
It is. And even within that central country, the source adds another layer of specificity.
Which is?
They aren't born into just any family there. The Buddha's answer here is they're born only into families of great Kshatriyas, that's the noble warrior ruler class, or great Brahmins, the priestly class. The Katiya Mahasalas or Bharana Mahasalas, high-status families.
So according to this source, rare, specific central regions, specific high-status families, that's quite restrictive.
Very. And the Buddha then speaks a verse, which the source provides. Rare is a noble person, they are not born everywhere. Where that wise one is born, that family thrives happily.
And does the commentary explain the terms in that verse, specifically noble person or wise one?
Yes, and this is really key for understanding the source's point. Rare is explained, just as we discussed, hard to find, much harder than finding those noble animals Ānanda was thinking about. But crucially, the term wise one dhiro in this verse, the commentary explicitly defines it within this specific source as meaning one of supreme wisdom. It refers to a Sammasambuddha.
A fully enlightened Buddha.
Exactly. So this whole discussion in Source 154 about the noble person and their specific birthplace and family, according to the source's own explanation, is specifically about the arising of a fully enlightened Buddha, the highest type of noble being.
That clarification is vital. It frames the whole passage.
It really does. So this source offers a very specific, almost you could say cosmographic view tied to geography and social class for the birth of a supreme Buddha, highlighting just how rare an event that is considered within this textual tradition.
Okay, so reflecting on these three scenarios, these three moments sparked by Ānanda's questions, they really give us different layers of insight based purely on these source commentaries.
Yeah, we started with Source 151. Showing the timeless core teaching, avoiding evil, cultivating good, purifying the mind, being constant, even when practice details like the Uposatha timing varied wildly across Buddhas.
Then Source 268 used that analogy of light, didn't it? Contrasting the conditional, temporary brilliance of the sun, moon, kings, even meditating elders, with the constant five-fold splendor of a Buddha, representing the state of enlightenment itself.
Right, highlighting its unique and unchanging nature. And then Source 154 just now gave us this very specific framework for the arising of a Sammasambuddha, emphasizing the extreme rarity and the specific conditions, location, family status associated with their birth, according to that text.
It leads to a rather interesting point when you put them side by side, doesn't it? Source 151 emphasizes the universality of the core teaching for all Buddhas, suggesting the path itself has this timeless quality. But then, Source 154 defines the noble person, or wise one, specifically as a Sammasambuddha, and states they are incredibly rare, born only under very specific geographic and social conditions.
That's the distinction presented across these particular sources, yes.
So a final thought, just based on what these sources tell us, what might this contrast the universal core teaching versus the highly specific and rare conditions for the birth of a supreme Buddha suggest about perhaps the difference between the path to awakening accessible in principle and the unique event of a world-teaching Buddha actually arising? Something to ponder, based solely on the perspectives within this material.